Hello everybody. Today I would like to talk about the hypothalamus and homeostasis as a whole, because I feel like this would be more of a useful topic to talk about, as it will sell and set a foundation for my next couple of videos in relation to this part of the brain and functions which could relate to this part. Now, the thing is with this part of the brain, sorry, my computer was what is happening? The thing is with this part of the brain, sorry, my mouse wasn't working. It's quite small, but it has a big role. And if I don't set this foundation now, it's going to be a problem in my later videos where you're going to be wondering. So you do not need any prior knowledge in order to watch this video like you would have with maybe some other episodes or sections, if you would like to call it. Nonetheless, let's talk about the hypothalamus as a whole. So it's small but critical. It regulates key survival functions such as hormones, temperature, hunger, and more. Now, the thing is with this, it's essential for both neuroscience and neurosurgery. So the thing is that I'll go over these points one at a time. I'm just reading them out for you because, as I said, it is a small but critical part. So it's about 4 grams, but it influences things like hormones, body temperature, and even your mood. So for example, the control of water would be like osmoregulation. And then you could probably think about the other types of like thermoregulation, that's temperature, etc. So it links the nervous system with the endocrine system. Now the endocrine system is just the system in your body which releases substances inside of your body. So if you do chemistry, exothermic is like it releases heat to the surroundings. Endothermic, it kind of just takes more energy in than it releases. So think about the word in like what I just mentioned. Endothermic is inside the body. So I'll be mentioning the word endocrine glands and the endocrinal system quite a lot. But it's important in hormone release practically. And it's quite a general term since there's a lot of different types of endocrinal glands. So it links the nervous system with the endocrine system. So it usually does this by sending signals to the pituitary gland, which is kind of like it's not really a neuron or anything, it's just another gland, allowing the brain to control hormone release into the body. So if you're catching on, I'm talking more about glands now instead of actual neural impulses. And this is quite different since it isn't directly linked, like it is directly linked to the brain, but glands also have a role in the brain. Not only, like, you do know, even the channel, it says 1 neuron at a time. There are other structures involved. So it's involved in things, as I said, like body temperature, heat, hunger, thirst, sleep, and hormones. But I wanted to get to the definition. So all these things help keep the body in balance, and this is called homeostasis. So keeping the body in a balance is homeostasis. So your body likes to be at 37 degrees Celsius at all times. So if it's too hot, your body will sweat, which will provide a cooling effect because of the relatively large latent heat of vaporization of water. It will take the heat away. So in a less scientific term, it would just be you're sweating. So basically what would happen is the heat is carried away, and that's to regulate your body. Therefore, it's like your body attempting to have, provide a type of homeostasis. Now, what is the hypothalamus? Sorry. I think this slide kind of glitched out, but it's located under the thalamus at the base of the brain. So this is why we call it the hypothalamus. Hypo usually means under. It's a different form of the word under. And the thing is, it's part of the diencephalon, which also includes the thalamus, and the epithalamus. And this is one of the oldest parts of the brain evolutionary, so it hasn't changed much. So our oldest, well, most recent, or our common ancestors would have obviously had this. And it may have not been, and this most likely in chimpanzees too, or orangutans. So the hypothalamus mainly just maintains homeostasis via neural and hormonal control, as I mentioned before. And the thing is, you're wondering what actually, why this is so important. And it plays a huge role in just balance. The main word for this video will be balance. So now we can get on to the more complex things. So I talked about what it is, where it may be located, just a general overview. But in these next couple of slides, I'll be going over the functions and the endocrine controls, so regulation, circadian rhythms, stuff like this. And all these will come together to give you a more larger understanding of the hypothalamus as a whole. So that's just a general overview of this video. So the particular boundaries of this, in terms of anatomically, it's like an optic chiasm. It's like, the thing is, it sits below the thalamus and above the pituitary gland, basically, and it's right in the center of the brain. So this is too general, I think. So this is something I would need to include in my next video. I would want to add a diagram here, to be honest. But it's like right below the thalamus. So imagine there's thalamus right below and above the pituitary gland, so wedged between it, and it's right in the center of the brain. So if you were to get a brain injury, this would most likely not be affected because it is very cushioned by the other tissues of the brain. And in front of it is the optic chiasm. So this is just another part I would have to go over in another video. But imagine you have optic nerves behind your eyes, which obviously send light signals to your brain in order to process an image so you can see what's going on. So the optic chiasm is just where the optic nerves cross, more of a relay. It's not a relay because relay bounces back. It's more of just it gets transferred. The impulses get transferred, or the light signals get transferred through the optic chiasm. And the hypothalamus is in front of it. So this means that the hypothalamus is behind the optic chiasm, below the thalamus and the pituitary gland. And behind it is the mammillary bodies, which are involved in memory. So they're involved, not directly responsible for memory, because as you know, that is mostly the hippocampus. But these structures are also part of the limbic system, which is linked to emotional memory. So what we know now, in front of the mammillary bodies, behind the optic chiasm, and wedged between the thalamus and above the pituitary gland. So hypothalamus, below the thalamus, above the pituitary gland. That's basically the main overview of its location. Now, it connects to the pituitary gland through a structure called the infundibulum. So it is quite a weird word to obviously hear, but the infundibulum is more of a stalk that allows hormones to travel between the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, or the pituitary as a whole. So if you didn't hear me right, the word is, well, you wouldn't really need to know this. This is the infundibulum, so it's just a stalk basically, and it allows hormones to travel. So as you know, there's neurons to allow impulse travel, and this infundibulum is just the structure that allows hormones to travel through them, obviously. This forms a floor and lower walls of the third ventricle of the brain. And the third ventricle is just a fluid-filled space in the middle of the brain, which protects this mainly. I will come back on what the infundibulum does, but for this video it would be too much to talk about since it is a very important part. But there are multiple structures like it, so I would need to split that up into a series most likely. The glands as a whole, most likely I would have to split into a series. Now, the nuclei overview of it. So if we wanted to look at it in terms of nuclei, it's just the plural for nucleus, by the way, so multiple nuclei. The hypothalamus is made up of several clusters of neurons. These neurons are called nuclei, so as I just mentioned, and each of these nuclei have specialized regulatory functions, so they have their role towards homeostasis. And these roles can be many different things, such as having an appetite, being thirsty, or having hormone release. Thinking about first, I'm going to drink some water. Sorry. But yeah, these nuclei are grouped into 3 zones: anterior zone, the middle zone, the posterior zone, and this helps us to understand their functions based more on their locations. So these regions that I just mentioned, anterior, middle, and posterior. So post usually means after, so it would most likely be after it. I'm not going to tell you now, but I will go into more detail into it later. Middle, obviously middle, the anterior. If posterior is after, anterior probably before. Now, there are about 5 key nuclei, which we would go over in this video, as it is only an introduction and an overview right now. So it's the supraoptic, paraventricular, the arcuate, the arcuate, and the lateral, and the ventromedial. These just sound like weird words, but I will go over what their functions are very slightly now. So the supraoptic and the paraventricular nuclei make vasopressin and oxytocin, and these are both hormones that control water balance and lactation during childbirth. So the lactation during childbirth one is more of a side thing, but everyone would have it mostly for controlling water balance in the body, so prevent you from sweating sometimes if you're sweating too much and losing too much of water. So you couldn't theoretically die. You could die from sweating too much, but it controls this. And these 2 nuclei are responsible for actually the production of these hormones. Well, not production, more of the release of these hormones. So as I said, the supraoptic and the paraventricular, these 2 would make vasopressin and oxytocin. The arcuate nucleus would help regulate the hormone release. So the amount of vasopressin and oxytocin the supraoptic and the paraventricular nuclei would release would be controlled and regulated by the arcuate nucleus, which would send signals to the pituitary gland to release growth hormone, etc., and more. So if you would want to grow, there would be supplements or medication that you could take to stimulate this gland more, but it's still in trial, to be honest. And the lateral nucleus is more of the hunger type of trigger nuclei, or nucleus. There's just many. So when active, this nucleus makes you feel hungry and drives you to eat. So if your belly rumbles, that would probably be due to the lateral nuclei. The ventromedial nucleus signals fullness, or mostly just being saturated with food fully. So it prevents vomiting after overeating and maintains energy balance. So actually it doesn't prevent vomiting technically, because you could eat over your limit, but then you would vomit to obviously maintain yourself. Like, this would also cause you to vomit because the ventromedial nucleus would signal the fullness, and your brain would have too many of these signals, and it would want a way to get this food out of you, so you would vomit and get the food out. So in a good way, it makes you obviously do this, and it prevents overeating basically. So the overview is just 3 zones: anterior, middle, posterior. And we don't really need to know that much in detail. All we need to know is that it helps us understand the functions based on the location. Supraoptic and paraventricular make vasopressin and oxytocin, which help control water balance. And on a side note, as I'm going to keep mentioning, some more lactation during pregnancy. The arcuate nucleus helps to regulate how much of this hormone is being released, and also has a role in the pituitary gland releasing. So the nucleus doesn't release the hormones. It sends signals to glands to release the hormones. The arcuate nucleus. So the lateral nucleus would trigger hunger, and the ventromedial nucleus will signal fullness or satiety, which is just being saturated with food. Now, the hypothalamic functions. There's about 3 that I'll look at more specifically. So it helps the body stay in balance. Homeostasis is one big point. It's just keeping the internal conditions stable, like temperature, fluid, or glucose. So, for example, if some people that are if you're thirsty, mouth gets dry, then you'll go reach for a water bottle or water. That's basically just osmoregulation. Or if you have too much water, you start sweating or vomiting to get the water out. It monitors and adjusts body temperature also, and it constantly receives feedback and makes quick changes when needed. That is important. So this thing here, circadian cycles, there is a whole slide on that which I'll be going through, where specifically this specifically happens, how this cycle works. It works by combining basically nerve signals and hormone signals, and this is unique because the hypothalamus is a brain structure because of the neurons involved in the signals, but it's also a hormone regulator as of the pituitary gland, triggering other glands or nuclei to release hormones. Now, in terms of coordinating neuron and hormonal responses, that basically concluded that this is it is part of the brain, but it could even be seen as its own specific structure, like its own organ, but that's very controversial, so I won't really get into that. Now, the hypothalamus, in terms of endocrine control, basically is quite a process, but I will go over the basics. So it basically releases hormones to influence the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland, anything that happens to it is mainly due to the hypothalamus. So in practice, it controls the pituitary gland. This pituitary gland is often called the master gland, as its hormones can pretty much regulate anything and anything in the body. Through this connection, it influences almost every hormone system in the body, and it sends releasing hormones to the anterior pituitary gland. And these include CRH, TRH. Like TRH is the most common one that you might have learned during your GCSEs if you did the Edexcel exam board. GnRH and others that obviously stimulate hormone production. So TRH also is like a very common one that you'd hear about if you're studying the hypothalamus. How it would go is usually the hypothalamus, then pituitary, then TRH. But anyways, examples are of these hormones. So CRH that I just mentioned, it would obviously go to ACTH, TRH goes to TSH, DNRH goes to LH or FSH. These are both involved in the menstruation cycles. Now, the posterior pituitary also I mentioned in the previous slide, hence I'm not mentioning it. It's vasopressin and oxytocin. But the thing is, these are both water control, so osmoregulation type of hormones. Now, if we want to talk about autonomic regulation, it controls the autonomic nervous system, which runs automatically. So this is a whole new chapter that I could be talking about, because this is quite hard to actually get your head around. But think of the autonomic regulation of the nervous system as it's just something that you're not controlling. So you're not thinking about breathing now, but now that I mentioned it, you are probably thinking about it. And breathing manually is very annoying, so I'm sorry if it annoyed you. But like blinking manually, now you're probably blinking because you're thinking about it. You probably started breathing again normally. So it's basically just doing things unconsciously without thinking about it. And this system manages functions like digestion too. You're not physically like forcing yourself to release, for example, enzymes to, like, you're not controlling it like consciously. Your body is doing that. So you can't really control yourself how many enzymes you release, something like that, when digesting something. Blood pressure, we can't change it. Like in our heart, we can't change the strength of it beating or how many times it beats a second. We're just not capable of that. It balances sympathetic and parasympathetic functions, and these two systems work like a gas pedal and brake for your body, basically. So like they both have they can drive the force, or they can obviously slow down and prevent, obviously, autonomic functions from taking place, or functions in general. So the anterior hypothalamus promotes rest, digestion and relaxation. This is the parasympathetic nervous system, known as rest and digest if you want to do it. So the hypothalamus, the anterior one, is the parasympathetic system at rest and digest, basically. That's the main points that should have got into your head. The posterior one, the hypothalamus, triggers the fight or flight response, and it activates when you're in danger, speeding up the heart, sending blood to your muscles. Adrenaline obviously would do this, a hormone that's released. So those are the main autonomic regulation points to talk about, because you can train yourself to not send a fight or flight response, but at the end of the day, you're not controlling yourself digesting. You're not controlling when you get tired. You can externally control it by going, for example, and having an energy drink, but you will crash, and you can't control when you're feeling tired, basically. And some people would take melatonin. Well, they would take tablets to go to sleep, obviously. Tablets wouldn't be needed if it was for the fact that these people, in theory, do not, can control all these things. Hence it's called autonomic. Auto meaning just happens, and yeah. I did say I was going to talk about the circadian rhythms. Okay, so practically, your body has its own clock. I know it sounds crazy, but let me try to land. So it's like this controls when you feel awake or sleepy during a 24-hour period. So you can control this theoretically with medication or drugs, but we're just assuming that we're talking purely about the brain. So circadian rhythms you would, in a rhythm, there would be a pattern and a tempo. That's how I think of it. Anyways, the SCN, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, I'm just going to always refer to as SCN now, it's the clock, basically. And basically what it is, it's the main center for the circadian rhythms. So it receives light signals from the eyes and adjusts your internal timing whenever those light signals are detected from the eyes. Now, it gets light signals from the retina to sync your cycle with day and night. So, some people, if you want to, like, if your sleep schedule is not really good, and then all of us, like, say if you had a 1 week, 2 week holiday, your sleep schedule got really bad, and now you're used to staying up and being on the phone. It's not a good example, but yeah, like you're stimulating your brain with all this light, and then your SCN just detects the light signals from, it detects the light signals from your eyes and it adjusts the internal timing all the time. Then obviously you wouldn't be able to randomly switch the pattern as well without drugs or medication, without obviously you having a hard time sleeping. So it syncs your bodily cycles with day and night, and that's why light exposure in the morning can help to reset your sleep cycle. This circadian rhythm is basically, it just tells the pineal gland, or like the SCN, it basically just tells the pineal gland when to release melatonin. As I said, melatonin tablets some people take, which makes you sleep. So it basically prepares your body for rest. Now, that is basically the entire overview of the circadian rhythms as a whole. You could make a whole video from this one slide, but that's basically the main concept. So the SCN, I said I wasn't going to say it again, but it's the suprachiasmatic nucleus. It receives the light signals from your eyes, optical nerve, obviously the optical chiasma, and then it obviously adjusts your internal timing. These light signals from the retina sync your bodily cycles with day and night, and it tells the pineal gland when to release melatonin to make you sleep. Feeding behaviors. So now that we're done with the circadian rhythms, this is why I said it's only an introduction, because every single slide on this video can be used as a factor. Or not a factor, every single slide in this video can be used to make a whole another video, or maybe even a series. Hence, I wanted to make it understandable for everyone to be able to enjoy, obviously. So, in terms of feeding behavior, the lateral nucleus is the hunger center. It makes you hungry. And when this area is active, it drives you to seek food. So it basically says the hypothalamus plays a major role in when and how much you eat, because it integrates signals from the stomach, fat tissue, and blood sugar levels to the brain to obviously signal you what to do next or inspire you to do next. Now, when this area is active, the lateral nucleus, it would make you go get food. So you wouldn't control when you are hungry. Maybe you could change your lifestyle choices, but as a whole, you can't really do much with it. It just makes you hungry. The ventromedial nucleus just makes you feel full, as I mentioned. Hormones like ghrelin and leptin influence these signals. So ghrelin influences hunger, leptin reduces it. So if you think about it now, the ventromedial nucleus would obviously release leptin, or have a linkage to leptin. Well, a linkage to the release of leptin, which would reduce the eating habits by signaling that fat stores are full. And the lateral nucleus, which makes you feel hungry, would have a link to ghrelin, which would increase hunger, therefore making you want to eat. Damage to these areas can lead to extreme weight loss or obesity or vomiting, etc. there was a documentary, I think, on someone with a damaged ventromedial nucleus. They were obviously very hungry all the time because their lateral nucleus was taking, obviously overclocking the person basically to want to eat all the time. And this is why actually hypothalamic tumors can lead to obesity or anorexia, so it is quite a dangerous behavior that can happen if the hypothalamus is damaged as a whole. Now, in relation, temperature regulation, it's basically a thermostat as well. So we know from the circadian rhythms, circadian rhythms is a clock. We also know it controls feeding and now temperature regulation. Now, actually, I missed out one. Also autonomic regulation, so breathing, etc. Things that you're not thinking about. So remember at the start where I said this is just a small part of the brain, about 4 grams. You'd essentially die if this one part of the brain is damaged. So that's what makes it so important. This is probably the part of the brain everyone's talking about if they're talking about the brain in general, most of the time. Now, temperature regulation. I did say that it acts as a thermostat for the body, and it constantly checks your body temperature to maintain it at 37 degrees Celsius and makes adjustments when needed. So the anterior hypothalamus helps to cool the body. So you can see that the anterior hypothalamus actually has a lot of roles in link to the hypothalamus, because the anterior hypothalamus also promotes rest, digestion, and relaxation. And now you're also seeing that it also helps cool the body. And it does this by activating sweating or widening blood vessels, so vasodilation. So the posterior part helps to warm the body. So it causes shivering, tightens blood vessels, gives you goosebumps maybe. Now this was passed down by our ancestors, actually, goosebumps, because most people aren't as hairy as they were before, like in that type of manner, because the thing is, your hair rises, so your pilar erecti muscles contract, which causes the hair to stand up, which would obviously insulate you from heat more. But nowadays, that was like, it would only really have much of an effect if you were really like, I'm talking like a gorilla or something like that, like an animal of that form. Anyways, yeah, so the posterior part helps to warm the body if you're cold. So if the hypothalamus is damaged, the body can't regulate its temperature. And if I'm right and remember correctly, the condition that I researched is poikilothermia, which is where the body temperature changes with the environment. So say if your body's at 37 degrees, if you have this condition, poikilothermia, then you go into a 23-degree room, your body would probably drop down to 30 degrees, 23 degrees, because your body wouldn't have any sense, or your hypothalamus wouldn't have any sense of how to regulate this. So, more clinical syndromes involving the hypothalamus. These can all be caused by trauma, for example, tumors, inflammation, or surgery that affected it. So, diabetes, there's many types of it, but diabetes insipidus obviously occurs when your body lacks vasopressin, and this is just another molecule or thing that you would need to know about, and it causes extreme thirst and frequent urination. So one of the symptoms of diabetes is always being thirsty, and urinating frequently. And diabetes is obviously due to ADH deficiency because this hormone isn't able to regulate osmoregulation in the body. Hypothalamic obesity is obviously from a loss of appetite control. So, say if the part of the hypothalamus, like for example, ghrelin, if it's released more due to the lateral nucleus being the only remaining um, nucleus, and the ventromedial nucleus is damaged, so the leptin is no longer being released as much. This would cause overeating and therefore obesity. Now, the thing is, there's many of these, but damage may also cause sleep issues, hormone deficiencies, abnormal body temperature, and these effects depend on which nuclei are affected. So, as I said, ghrelin it obviously increases hunger. If the lateral nucleus is damaged, then ghrelin won't be released as much, or maybe too much. So, yeah, we've come to the end now, and there are many clinical takeaways that I would like you to see here. So it's basically a key homeostatic regulator. If you forgot what homeostasis was, go to about 3 minutes into this video. I mentioned it. It controls endocrine, autonomic, and behavioral functions. So endocrine is just hormone release. Autonomic is basically just without you thinking you're doing it. It's just going on inside your body. Behavioral, you can control that, but it's obviously your brain is mostly involved. And it's essential knowledge for neurology and neurosurgery that you would, if you would like to partake in that in the future. And it basically keeps us alive with most parts of the brain. Every part I've mentioned would keep you alive. Like the hippocampus I talked about. If you weren't alive, you wouldn't be able to remember bad events that had happened. So say if you crossed the road without looking right and left, you got hit by a car now, and now you're in the hospital. Say if your hippocampus wasn't working, you got out of hospital, or that's a bit extreme. But say if you go to do that again, you wouldn't get PTSD or something like that because your hippocampus doesn't remember that. But that's a very, very stretched out example because there's millions of other factors that go into that. Because it's also due to the fact that the hippocampus is right, like near the center of the brain. So I would doubt that would be affected. But yeah, you wouldn't be able to get PTSD. Nonetheless, let's just keep it at that. And it connects the brain with autonomic systems. So as I said, and this would help us coordinate both fast and slow responses. The thing I forgot to mention is that nerve responses are always very fast and slow responses. Like, for example, the menstrual cycle takes a whole week to get through because it's a very slow response. And a nerve response is like if you burned your hand, you'd feel it instantly. So damage to this area can lead to serious clinical problems, and understanding the hypothalamus is always essential for diagnosis and treatment in neurology and neurosurgery. It's practically just a central center, a structure for students, researchers, and clinicians to master and understand it in complete depth, even though it's such a small part of the brain. So if you enjoyed, please comment. If you would if you enjoyed, please subscribe and like. But if you would like to connect and see another video from me, please comment. If you would want me to alter these types of styles of my videos, add some diagrams. I've tried to hold back on the diagrams a bit because they can be distracting. But if you would like to connect, just let me know in the comments. I can give you more, obviously, types of videos. And my exams finish soon, so I'll be able to provide more to you whenever possible after the exams. So yeah.